I was about 2-3 years into pastoring when I entered into recovery for my own addictive behavior. Okay. So I consider myself a recovering sex addict.
Okay.
And so, I can look back and we can get into this if you want around just the way that was handled, the choices I made, the choices those who I was seeking counsel from, the way we handled that given my position as a pastor. Have lots of regrets about that. A lot of things I'd tell people to do differently. Bottom line is I probably needed to come out with it back then and take a break and either be restored through a more official sort of means, but that's not what happened. And so I went into my own recovery process for several years. This is starting in about 2008 and 2008, early 2009. And about 3 years into my own recovery, my therapist fired me as a client and said, you need to be doing this work professionally. And so I went back to school, got another master's degree, worked on becoming a licensed therapist, became a certified sex addiction therapist, all kinds of trainings, and started doing the work professionally on the side.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad podcast. Again, today we have Jake Porter. We were joking around prior, seeing if it's like Jacques Porte or something odd, but no, he said it's just Jake Porter.
Pretty simple.
Very excited to chat with you today. We did talk also that we briefly met in person. I look forward to having a longer conversation in person. But let's get right into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your business, and your family.
Yeah, so I am from the Houston area. I am a native Houstonian, actually about 30 miles outside of Houston, in what was at the time a very small town. I'm sure we'll get into this later, but a town that got deep roots. So my great-great-great-grandfather actually held the original Mexican land grant to the land. So if you're a Texas history buff, you know what that means. But grew up out there. Now it's a much busier area. So I'm a psychotherapist. I was a pastor for 13 years. In 2017, I left pastoring and went full-time doing counseling work. And I started Daring Ventures is the name of my practice in Houston. We specialize working with addiction and trauma issues. I specialize working with couples. So I see couples from all over. Most of my couples fly in from out of town and spend 2 to 4 days with me, 6 hours a day, usually 2 to 4 days. So I do intensive counseling work most of the time after the discovery of betrayal. So that's the work I do professionally. The practice has grown now. Got about 22 people on the team and see people from all over the world and have an online presence and all that good stuff. I also have a podcast and a YouTube channel, all of that. But the more important stuff is being married to Kristen. We got married in 2017, and we have 2 kids. Magnolia Jane, who will quickly tell you she likes to be called MJ. She is 3.5, and then Lottie Jo is too young to tell us what she wants to be called, but she just turned 1 last week. So life is...
Well, happy birthday to Lottie Jo. That's phenomenal.
Thank you. Yeah.
The first birthday is always an exciting one. Did you do the smash cake and all that?
We had the smash cake available, but she was not much into smashing. She is a protein eater, Adam. Okay. That's a protein eating girl.
Smash steak then is what you should have.
That's right. Yes. That's what we should have done. If we'd actually thought about it, absolutely, or some sausage or something. She's a good eater, but the cake wasn't doing it for her. But we had a good time for sure.
Yeah, my daughter turns 1. I was telling her for the recording, like in 3 weeks, and it's like she is not one to. I don't think she's ever had cake. Well, no, I don't. 90% certain she hasn't. Adam, has Diana had any cake yet? Okay, well, my 9-year-old says she has, so he probably fed it to her. So if I were to guess,
there you go.
Yeah, it's probably his fault. But I look for like with Rourke, my middle, he was kind of like sort of touched it, and then he was like, oh, I got this, and made a mess out of it. Adam made a mess out of it immediately. There was no question about it. I had to watch that. I was deployed to Africa when he turned 1. So I was over in Africa watching on FaceTime, watching him smash it all up. So it was fun. Fun, quote unquote,
Sure.
So one thing I picked up in your intro I want to ask about. So you, in our pre-call, you told me you were a pastor from 2004 to 2017. I just picked up on you said you got married. You've been married for 7 years. So is that in 2017 as well?
That's right.
Is there a correlation between getting married and not being a pastor anymore?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And man, we could fall down that rabbit hole, and that's fine if you want to. We spend the rest of our time together talking about that, how that unraveled. Here's the executive summary though. I dated my wife for about 7 years before we got married, which was entirely too long. And I knew it was time to marry her in 2016. And I even was talking to my best friend and my therapist and, the people closest to me, like, hey, I'm going to ask Kristen to marry me. It's time to do this. This is the right thing. I love her. She loves me. This is clearly a good thing. And I said to those who knew me best, who had known me longest, and do not let me do what I've done in past relationships, which is get to a place of commitment and then sabotage it, which is exactly what I did. And so into 2016, beginning of 2017, I cheated on her. I connected with an ex-girlfriend, broke up with her. We went several months without much contact. And during that time, I actually kind of came unraveled. Because I knew I'd made a mistake. There was all kinds of shame about it, all this stuff, and decided that I needed to resign pastoring. I was working way too much, trying to do private practice as a therapist and be a pastor, and and also I felt like my behavior, what I had done, it felt wrong, and so I made a plan to exit pastoring. Long story short, that plan was not executed the way I had it in my mind. Instead, everything kind of became public, that I had, acted out and cheated on my girlfriend, and a whole bunch of other stuff from my past came out. And so I resigned kind of in disgrace and effective immediately instead of over a 10-week period or whatever I had planned. And the day I resigned, Kristen heard about it from a mutual friend, and she texted me and said, "Hey, do you need a friend? Do you need to talk?" And we met up at a restaurant that evening, and I talked to her, and she just showed such incredible grace and care, and it just broke me. And about 2 months later, we ran off and got married, because she was pretty clear with me that she was not going to date me anymore. She would be my friend or my wife, but she was done dating me. So in the moment, it felt like a real easy choice, and glad I made it. Now 7 years later. Yeah.
That's I could totally go down that rabbit hole for the entire conversation. I do want to dig into that a little bit more. Just kind of the obviously the Bible kind of talks about what it means to be a pastor and an elder, that type of stuff in church. So I'm assuming after your church found out about it, that there was no coming back from that at that point. So out of your hands, how was you? Because you were already doing your private practice. And now, I've got like 17 questions I want to ask. I don't know which direction I want to go. So I'll go this direction to start. Were you focusing on the same type of clients before as you are now, meaning like trauma patients and especially couples right now where you're at? Were you focusing on those patients before and still currently?
I was. So a part of my story is that I was about 2-3 years into pastoring when I entered into recovery for my own addictive behavior. Okay. So I consider myself a recovering sex addict. Okay. And so, I can look back, and we can get into this if you want, around just the way that was handled, the choices I made, the choices those who I was seeking counsel from, the way we handled that given my position as a pastor. Have lots of regrets about that. A lot of things I'd tell people to do differently. Bottom line is, I probably needed to come out with it back then and take a break and either be restored through a more official sort of means, but that's not what happened. And so I went into my own recovery process for several years. This is starting in about '08 and '08, early '09. And about 3 years into my own recovery, my therapist fired me as a client and said, you need to be doing this work professionally. And so I went back to school, got another master's degree, worked on becoming a licensed therapist, became a certified sex addiction therapist, all kinds of trainings, and started doing the work professionally on the side. Honestly, my thinking was, wow, it's not like I'm making tons of money as a pastor. If I could make 300 extra bucks a week, that'd be awesome. That was my mindset. But very quickly, the demand grew. At the time, it's certainly different now, but at the time, there weren't that many folks out there who had the clinical training that I had gotten and was continuing to work toward, but also had that Christian worldview and could come from a place of spirituality and faith. And so, here I am, I'm in this tiny town in Texas, and all of a sudden one day I get a call from a couple in Washington State. And it's like, they just heard about me, word of mouth from someone. And then, not long after that, it was Georgia and then upstate New York and it just grew and, which was great. And God was blessing it, but also some of my own stuff, hero child and all this, as I was getting maxed out. I was still senior pastor of this church. That's a full-time job, but then just piling all of these hours and this other really taxing work and started reaching a place of burnout. And that combined with, okay, it's time to get married. It was a sort of a perfect storm situation. Yeah.
So you mentioned before that you had a couple friends that you were saying, hey, don't let me sabotage this like I've done before. Well, how did those conversations go? Because that's one of those things that, especially, you're in GoBundance. So we like to talk about you are the 5 people you're around most type of thing. Surround yourself by the right people to push you in the right direction. How much freedom did you let them have to prevent you from doing something stupid? And like what kind of, for lack of better terms, authorization did you give them to do that versus, obviously holding yourself accountable and doing all of that?
Yeah. So, I think looking back on it now, I meant it when I said it. Like in fall of 2016, and I'm having these conversations, I really meant it. But then what happened was, as my anxieties, my fears, my insecurities were getting activated inside of me, I got into all kinds of, clinically, I would describe these with my clients as cognitive distortions, right? Thinking errors, which what that means is I began lying to myself. I began lying to myself about the nature of our relationship. And was it really as good as I thought? And do I really, is this really the right thing? And when we start lying to ourselves, we will start lying to others. Now, we may not know we're doing it at first, but we will, right? I mean, that's what happened. And so the very people who I had gone to and I'd said, hey, don't let this happen, fast forward a few months, I'm relaying to them a false reality about my current situation, such that, maybe they knew, maybe they didn't feel free to say it, but I did have some friends who were saying, you're wrong, that's stupid, she deserves better than what you're doing. I had a few voices like that in my life, but a lot of them didn't say anything because they didn't know. My transparency, had gone away as I had really started deceiving myself.
I accidentally muted myself. There we go.
Oh.
Our ability to lie to ourselves is insane. Because it's literally ourselves. We've convinced ourselves to do any number of things. and it's kind of crazy. You mentioned something earlier, hero child. Can you explain to me what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when we're talking about family of origin work, so family of origin, that's the system you grew up in. And it doesn't have to be like mom, dad, siblings. It could be grandparents. It could be neighbors. It could be a coach that you spend a lot of time with, right? But that system in which we were raised in those formative years, in a perfect world, children don't adapt to the system. The caregivers adapt the system to the child and protect the child within the system, right? So it's like, that's why, with a 1-year-old, I imagine you're rearranging where the breakable stuff in the house is, and maybe you're getting the little locks on the cabinets in the kitchen again, so they can't get it right. That is adapting the environment to the child rather than the other way around. When that doesn't happen relationally, now we're not talking about swallowing house cleaning supplies, but we're talking about like being safe relationally.
Yeah,
it's okay to be me. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to be vulnerable because I'm going to be protected. Those sorts of things. Children will take on different roles, and there's a hero child, there's lost child, there's something called scapegoat. The hero child is the one who is this falsely empowered child where they feel like their place in the family system comes from caretaking others. So my value and my worth comes from being a hero. So I'm loved here. I have a place in this system because I'm so smart, because I'm so helpful, because I'm really good at this stuff, because I earn my keep around here in some way. And, that's a false empowerment of a child, because the reality is children can't take care of adults. Right. Yeah. But if I grow up believing that's the case, then I'm going to show up later in life, thinking that my value, my worth, my place, my security in this relationship is going to be from me being a caretaker, me being a servant, me being a hero. Yeah. Whatever language you want to use around that.
So how did that continue to show up as an adult, or did it continue to show up as an adult, or what does that look like later?
Yeah, it absolutely did. So, I feel the need to say this because my parents are both alive and I have a great relationship with them, and they're wonderful. Truly, I'm not just saying that, like, they're amazing parents. I'm grateful that I get to enjoy an adult friendship with them now. We spent Easter over there, and long after the 50 other guests were gone, my wife and I and our kids are over there hanging out, and it was a blast. So I'm really grateful for that. And just through a combination of things, and this is nothing that parents do on purpose. Our kids, Adam, our kids are going to have these stories too.
Of course.
But I became kind of to my mom, I took on this belief. I don't think it was, I know now it wasn't real, but I took on this belief around needing to be a hero. I'm the wise one. I'm the smart one, or whatever. I can perform, and I can step in and be whatever. And so the way that would show up for me in adulthood was particularly with groups of women. It was different with men. Okay. But with women, I'm Superman. So as a young pastor, 22 years old, I'm senior pastor of this church, ask me to, be the guest speaker at this month's ladies Bible study. And, I step in there and I'm running the show. I've got charisma. I'm out front. I'm confident, but stick me in a room full of all the deacons, all these old men, and I'm quiet and I'm just trying to get through it and not say anything and just blend in. Very different role. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I could totally see that. So I often, talk to a lot of people about finance and real estate education and that type of stuff. And I try to apply it. So there's a book that I really recommend to a lot of people all the time. It's Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, where it kind of talks to you a lot about where you get your thought process on money. And I talk to people about that all the time, where we've built a wireframe in our brain through, you call it the family of origin, through how we grew up on how we look at money. Right. Yeah. And you could do that in relationships. You could look at that in how is it that I how I react in relationships in this way, likely because of either things I saw and ran towards or things I saw and ran away from. And it's probably going to be one or the other. Often I talk about it in money, because if you saw, like I, saw my parents paycheck to paycheck all the time. So that's what I did, for a very long time. I had no idea anything different. And it sounds like even, and I talk to people about that as well. Like, you could look at your relationship. Like, how is it that you communicate with your kids? It's probably because you're either running away from how you were communicated with, or because that's how you just learned how to do it. It's that cycle of abuse kind of going, like, hey,
Right.
An abused child becomes the abuser who abuses children, who then becomes an abuser, and it just kind of goes around. Now, thankfully, the likelihood of an abuser having been abused is very high, but the likelihood of an abuser abusing is low, thankfully. You increase your chances of being an abuser just by being abused. So you increase your chances of being a paycheck to paycheck person by watching somebody do that same thing. So
Totally.
I don't remember where I was going with that as a whole, but yes. So I want to now go into your family of origin a little bit. Usually I start off at the beginning talking about this, but let's go now into then your dad's dad. Kind of what was it like growing up in your family? Obviously your mom as well, but just a little bit of the history of Jake, where you came from.
Yeah. So I come from sort of salt of the earth folks. Okay. My dad was he did a lot of things. He wore lots of hats. When I was first born, he worked at one of we have a lot of oil refineries and chemical plants around us. He worked out there, but he had a strong entrepreneurial streak within him. His brother and his high school best friend opened a series of businesses together all through my childhood. So they had gas stations and convenience stations. They at one point had a chain of Subway sandwich shops that ran from Houston up to Dallas. Let's see, he had many warehouses at one point. He had a pizza restaurant at one point. He was always buying land. Jake, they're not making any more of this, they're not making any more of this. So I watched my dad create. I watched him build, literally, because he's also just this genius when it comes to working with his hands. We have some land that our family owns, and he said one day, I'm going to build a barn out here, and he just built a barn. No drawings, no list of supplies or materials. It was all in his head. There's a barn all of a sudden. Things like that, and it was a wonder to see. Eventually, when I was more like later junior high and then high school, he got his license to be a financial advisor, stockbroker, financial advisor, and he did retirement planning for several years. And then a few years ago, he retired, which that's not going to happen as long as he's kicking. And so he decided to start farming hay on this land that we own. So now he's a hay farmer. Yeah.
Never stops. Got it.
Never stops. Never stops. He's, if he had been born today, they would have medicated him quickly.
Of course.
Just very quickly. He's brilliant. He really is one of the most talented men I know. And also, I'll say this, he has a very strong sense of character and was really intentional about instilling that in us as children, especially around keeping our word. If we tell someone this is going to stay between us, then it's going to stay between us, that kind of thing. And very service oriented. He had a lot of employees who were lower income folks, I'd say, working in his restaurants and that kind of thing. And I watched him be so generous, like during the holidays, making sure their kids had a good Christmas, making sure they had a good meal for the holidays. And so, that was my dad. My mom, I'll mention her. She was a school teacher, public school teacher. and also just very devoted to her work, and really also devoted to us as children, like really, making sure that we had what we needed, and wanted us to have what we needed to have, so no one was picking on us or teasing us and that kind of thing. My grandfathers, so my dad's dad, his name was Earl. I carry his name. My name is actually Jacob Earl.
All right.
And he was a World War II hero. He flew over Europe. He was actually shot down over enemy territory, had to be smuggled back across enemy lines by the French resistance. So
nice.
Actually, if you watch the movie, it's on Netflix right now. It's based on a book, All the Light We Cannot See. That was really cool because it gave a glimpse into the kind of his area of the war and what he was doing. So he was a bomber. And so he served as in the military and then came back to his hometown and became one of the first city councilmen when the town was incorporated. So he was a city councilman. He served as mayor. He went on to become a county commissioner, and helped do all kind of things locally. So established the local, high school scholarship association and the Veterans Memorial, getting that going, and a Hall of Honor for, local high school athletes to be remembered. And so that streak of service is huge in my family.
That's awesome. Yeah. As a former military guy myself, that is a fun story to hear. I'm definitely going to have to go watch All the Light We Cannot See now for sure.
Oh yeah. It's good.
So there's tons of stories about the French kind of helping folks come back, and there's a bunch of French and British women that were helping a lot of that, the smuggling of the potential POWs coming through. So that's phenomenal. I could totally spend another 2 hours talking about that. So next time we meet in person, we'll have to sit down on a fire and have some chats, because I would love to hear some of those stories. But so when you were growing up, obviously you saw your dad doing all sorts of these different things. Like, did he talk to you about the different businesses that he was doing and all that stuff? Or how did, what kind of conversations did you have with your dad about all of the things that he was getting into?
He did. I mean, he talked a lot about it at the time. I don't know that I recognized it at the time, right? But now looking back, all these little lessons, buy land because they're not making any more of that. I already said that one. But also, I remember one time we were driving home. I don't know where we were coming from, but there was something that was being built. When I grew up, we lived pretty far out in an undeveloped area. I say it's all relative, right? It seemed like forever back then, maybe 20 minutes out from town. We'd talk about going into town, right? Which was a tiny, small town, less than 2,000 people. But we were driving home and there was something that was being built. And he pulls over and he says, "Come on, Jake, I want to go in here. I want to see this building And there was a sign that said like no trespassing or authorized personnel only, something like that. He either saw me looking at it, or maybe I said, we can't go in there or something. And he held up this clipboard. He always had these, it's really like this stainless steel metal binder thing.
I've got two of those. Yes. Exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
Okay. So he always had that thing, and he grabs it and he said, "Look, son, you just carry this with you and act like you're supposed to be there. Come on." And it was like, oh, well, that's what you do, and we go in and he's like inspecting this building and he's looking at it. And, when he had the mini warehouses, I remember us pulling in again, driving home from somewhere or driving to somewhere from home, but they were kind of halfway between town and where we lived. And he said, "Okay, we're going to drive through here. We're going to count locks. You look on your side and I'm going to look on my side. And every time you see a combination lock, I want you to count it." And he was figuring up, how many, what's the revenue going to be that month? How many units are rented out? And he was explaining that to me. So, yeah, I mean, I saw him work. He I would be with him and I would see him working and he would bring me into that process often. Yeah.
Interesting. So how does one grow up with a dad that's doing all of these different entrepreneurial ventures and go through all this stuff? How does one then become a pastor?
Well, okay. So, that's a good question. So I used to tell myself.
Why I asked it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, excellent. You're very good at this. You've done this before. So here's the story I used to tell myself. Okay, when I was younger, the story I told myself when I was younger was, I'm more like my mom. Okay, so my mom gravitated toward literature, right, and teaching, and those sorts of things, and so pastoring involves a lot of study, and seminary is very intense academically, right? And lots of teaching. There's a big teaching role there. And so the story I told myself was, I'm a lot like my mom, and I did feel a sense of calling to being a pastor. Also, it just so happened that I was filling in as like the summer intern at the church the summer between my junior and senior year of college, when our pastor resigned, and my dad was the chairman of the personnel committee at the time, and said, do you want to preach for a week or two until we find an interim? And I ended up preaching the whole summer, and people were like, you need to send your resume in. And so I did, and because I felt like they wanted me to, I had to, hero child, right? Like they need me. Oh, they need me.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I ended up there. Here's what I know now, though, is that while my skill sets in the more obvious ways are very different from my father, I couldn't build anything. I can't. I'm not constructing anything from wood. Like, I know I can sit here and I can see clients for 1 hour and pay someone to go do it, right? Like that's my math. So on the surface, while our skill sets may look really different, actually underneath that entrepreneurial, creating something from nothing, leading of an organization, building of a team, I watched my dad do it. Yeah. And I have that inside of me, and pastoring involves that.
Yeah.
There is, especially,
I was actually going to ask about that.
Yeah. Especially in a smaller church where, a senior pastor is going to be more involved in the day to day. There's a lot of management and leadership, hands-on management and leadership. And especially if the church is in a place of transition or wanting to change culture, there's that creative element of, creating new systems and vision and all that kind of stuff. So, and obviously what I do now, I've got a business and constantly adding on to it and creating new programs within it. And I totally see the direct line from my dad to me with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because there are some folks that I listen to. A lot of them were talking about these younger pastors that keep finding themselves in a world of trouble, because they think they should be a pastor, but they don't know what it takes to like you're running a business inside of your church. Like you are the CEO of that particular business. Now, granted, there is a much higher level board of directors than you. You have the Bible and God sitting right there, right? So, but you still have to manage the finances. You have to know what's coming in. You have to have the right leadership. You have to know who your people are. You have to keep track of what's going on, and then you have, of course, the higher authority to fall under as well. And I don't think most people look at it that way. So, I would love to hear your take on and I don't want to say it this way because people have talked about the church being more of a business, but the business side of church, because there is a business side of it. So
100%, it's a reality of this world, right? It's a reality of this world, and it's unavoidable. And those people who think that you can do pure ministry without any business-like considerations, to me, that even the New Testament, I mean, we could get into specific scriptures. I think there are scriptures that talk about an elder needs to manage his household well. Well, why?
Yes.
because he's going to be managing the household of God. I mean, that's what it says. You know, and there are other passages we could point to as well in that. So, I mean, it's definitely there. And I think that there is not a whole lot of detail about how to do that in scripture because context can be so different, right?
Yeah.
You know, I used to go to Africa somewhat regularly to Uganda, and I would go out to these villages and see churches there and meet pastors there and do training with pastors there. Well, guess what? Their business skills, which they did have to have, they looked very different than what I had, you know, as a North American pastor, right? But it's still there. But context is going to make a difference. But for me, you know, I very quickly got in there and realized, like, okay, money is an issue, you know.
Look at the thumbs up that gives you, man. Oh
man. Okay. So money's an issue. Managing of human resources, of people. You know, how do you organize people? How do you create systems? All of that. And interestingly enough, you know, again, as I look back now, I see my dad right there, like with me. Like he was one of my absolute top go-to people while I was pastoring. Like, what do we do here? What, you know, like I wanted him on certain committees. I wanted his input on these things because his heart was in it. He had the know-how and I trusted him. So between him and a couple of other key people that I somehow was wise enough to put around me as a 22-year-old kid who was a philosophy and music major, you know, nothing practical to my training, they taught me. You know, they taught me how to create a budget, how to run a budget, and how to organize people and all of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, there for a while, I was signed up to get my master's in theology because I was very interested in chasing all of that down, and I didn't want to go get like my MDiv because I was like, boy, that is way more than I'm wanting to put in, but I do want to get a lot more practical understanding and tangible education on theology. I ended up getting selected to go be a pilot in the Air Force, so like right at the same time. So I canceled the classes and then went off to go the officer side in the military. But I still often wonder, like, I'm like looking at that, like especially with my entrepreneurial side of me, I'm like, boy, I'm just interested in the long term where that might bring me.
It's not too late. It's not too late.
It's not. It's never too late. No, it's just now. It's like, how do I manage the time to run businesses, be a dad with 3 kids running around in the house, the third one about to literally be running around in the house. She's like this close to just sprinting across the living room. But man, oh man, I couldn't imagine trying to go through and get my master's now or let alone an MDiv. But but I do look at that now, going to church every time that every time I tithe or I look at what's going on in the church, it's like, man, this is such a business to run, and we're in a rather large church, so it's like, goodness gracious, this is insane. But anyways, let's go into your practice a little bit. No, I don't want to go there yet. I want to go back to your wife, right?
Okay.
So you had everything going on. Your wife says, "Hey, like you screwed up. I know you screwed up." Like gives you that massive representation of grace. What does that look like to you practically, walking through your life, especially at that moment when you're resigning from being a pastor, your life is completely flipped upside down? Having somebody like her, what did that look like for you practically?
It was like I would be an absolute idiot to not go all in here. You know, it was so clear to me, like, there's not going to be something better come along. Like, what could be better than someone knowing, like really knowing just the worst of the worst and still saying, yeah, I'm in. I mean, like, and part of that is her own faith, and her own journey with God. And so she came to Christ as a young adult. She had moved to Houston following a guy who she was engaged to, and then she met Jesus, and that relationship ended. And her boss, who had become one of her very best friends, invited her to church, which was my church. So she actually started attending my church. That's how we met. I baptized her. We developed this relationship over time. Anyway, so she knew it all, but her best friend, who was a member of my church, who knew me pretty well, her name's Lonnie. Lonnie told Kristen, my wife, early on, he may be a terrible boyfriend, but he'll be an amazing husband. And Kristen had a deep sense of just felt like we were going to end up married. She thought that from very early on. And she believed that. She believed what Lonnie told her. And she reminds me of that often. It's a terrible boyfriend, but a good husband. Yeah.
I'm intrigued to find out what that meant in practice. Like terrible boyfriend, but good husband. Like why was that a description of you?
So, it's like you're on a team or you're not, right? Like you're on the team or you're not on the team. I was not in. I was in, but not in the relationship, right? We'd go out, I'd take her out, but then, I wouldn't call her for a week.
Mm-hmm.
I would not invite her to certain things that it's like, why would I not invite her to that? Mm-hmm. It's like I was trying to be close, but not too close, right? Like, there was something about being all in that really frightened me. And so, I was always sort of there, but not there, in, but not in. And, I know she felt that. I know she did.
Yeah.
And that's evidenced today by her continuing to have a sensitivity to feeling left out. So if I've got something going on and she feels left out, even if it's totally unintentional on my part, there's a real sensitivity there, so that's something I try to be very mindful of. Well, guess what? After that pivotal moment when it's like, and she basically says all in or not in, and we'll just be friends and we'll call it good. Then, it was all in. It's like, okay, password to my devices and share my location, and you're everywhere I'm going, you're going, if possible. We know that's not actually practical in the day-to-day of life, but it was pretty much from that day. There was probably a couple week transition where it's like, is this happening? Are we doing? Is this really? But pretty quickly it was like, that's it. We're inseparable, and we actually eloped. We ran off to the Texas Hill Country, got married with a friend, came back, told my parents, and then about a month later threw a big party for everyone to celebrate.
Awesome.
And it was awesome.
So that goes back to what I talked about with I don't know if I got to this part, but we going back to the finance thing, we all have a wireframe that we've built, right? And until something comes and crumbles that wireframe up for us to rebuild it, whether it's an activity, a person, whatever it is, something has got to happen to come and change our thought process behind why we're behaving the way we are, doing the things we're doing, or saying the things we're saying. You acting a fool, if I can so say so.
And absolutely.
Then, having all of that happen and no longer being a part of being a pastor of the church was like that crumple of the wireframe moment. Like I was looking at life through this is the way I had my lens going, completely need to change it. And it sounds like you did completely change that. Your now wife was amazing in being a part of that. My wife was amazing in being a part of my transformation in finances and life in general. So and I've said it once and I've said it 100 times on this podcast, is one of the number one choice besides being a Christian we can make in life is who we marry. And if you can marry the right woman,
100%.
Man, oh man, is your life completely changed.
Absolutely.
In the military, I saw a ridiculous amount of divorces, a ridiculous amount of infidelity, a ridiculous amount of porn addiction, all of the stuff that you could. I mean, you'd be deployed and people are like sharing their drives with each other for all the stuff that men are doing overseas, sharing the drives together, right? I know 1,000% that can completely destroy your marriage. And since this is kind of your expertise, I'd love to dig into that a little bit, because there's so many similarities I see from my military time as I do in entrepreneurs, like the driven ability to be able to just make things happen, to go. So it doesn't matter. We don't know what's on the other side of this corner, but we're going to take it anyway. We don't know what's on top of that hill, but we're going to take it anyways.
Right.
Like that's just the way that a lot of entrepreneurs act, similarly as military members. And that's one of the reasons I started this podcast, is seeing some of the similar things of like, hey, you're saying you're doing all of this stuff for your family, but you're working 19 hours a day. So tell me how much you're doing this for your family, right?
Yeah.
Can you explain to me how that's benefiting your family when, you're not going to see your kid until they're 20? So, I would love to, since you have this expertise, chat a little bit about some of those things that are going, those devils that are going to show up in your life one way or another, those dragons that you have to slay, and what it was like having to slay that dragon, and now like helping other people make sure that they keep that dragon at bay.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So, whatever it is, whether it's porn or it's working too much or it's drinking or it's, whatever the behavior or the subject, whatever it is, I think it comes down to that I'm trying to do something or use something on the outside to change how I feel on the inside. Right? So there's something happening inside of me. Could be stress, anxiety, fear, but it could also be excitement, anticipation. I mean, there's just something inside me that I can't manage on my own. I can't regulate it on my own. And I'll kind of bookmark that. I'm going to circle back to it. So I figure out ways to get these momentary reprieves, like, oh, that's relieving, that's soothing, that's, and some people even think that consciously, right? Like, oh, this makes me feel better. And what happens is the brain goes, oh, well, that worked. And you get a dopamine hit, and dopamine is about learning. And so it's okay, I'm going to do that again. And so every time that comes up, now I'm like reinforcing this pathway in my brain that this is what I do for that. The problem is most of those things, somewhere deep down in us, we have a sense of shame or guilt that actually leaves me with more despair or hopelessness or whatever. And so it's like piling on. It's piling on the dysregulation inside of me. It's piling on the feelings, the emotion state, the whatever it is that I'm trying to outrun. And that's the wickedness of the addiction. Well, that regulation piece, and this is like straight up science fact, okay? Like it is absolutely certain that we need secure, healthy relationships in order to self-regulate. There is a relationship between me being in securely attached relationships and me being able to regulate on my own. So for example, if I have a terrible day, something terrible, let's say, and thank God this isn't happening, but let's say I've got a subpoena right out there, right? Someone's suing me. They want all their records, a couple's mad, they got divorced, whatever. And I'm all upset. If I know Kristen will be there tonight, Kristen will be with me in this, I'm not alone in this. If I know that gives me the capacity to tolerate it and regulate it on my own until we get together. Right. So there's this connection between self-regulation and what we call co-regulation. And I think, if I may be so bold, a lot of men don't know how to do co-regulation.
Yeah.
And therefore they don't know how to do self-regulation in healthy and appropriate ways. So, so what happens then is, well, I'm going to regulate by fill in the blank. I'm going to work 19 hours a day. Then I'm going to come home and I'm going to pour myself a big whiskey, 3 fingers of whiskey every night. Or I'm going to, after everyone goes to bed, I'm going to look at porn or whatever it is. I'm going to gamble.
Interesting. As a Christian, as a pastor, did you find that relationship with Jesus, can that also be a way to help with the co-regulation, right? Like going to scripture and using that as your ability to bounce back and forth those ideas, those thoughts?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of research on this. Lots of research on this. So what we're talking about is something called attachment theory. If anyone wants to geek out to it, this is attachment theory. There's research about attachment to God. And what we see is that, yes, absolutely, God can be the secure attachment figure. However, here's what's interesting. Most of the time, you see someone's relationship to God and the security or insecurity in their relationship with God mirror their other relationships. So in other words, if I am insecurely attached to my mom, my dad, my wife, whatever, I actually have an insecure attachment to God. And how does that show up? Well, a lot of these studies, what they did is they actually had people share like the content of their prayer lives. And you can analyze the language to determine the security or insecurity and type of insecurity that people have with God. It overlays perfectly with the types of security and insecurity that people have with other humans. So yes, God can be that attachment figure, but it's not the quick fix. It's not like, I know God, therefore I have secure attachment. You have to work on that relationship just like any other one.
So I wonder on that attachment theory, does the theory go that? So I'm coming at this with a semi answer in my head. So I'm going to give you the semi answer in my head so that you can poke holes in it. Especially men, we have a tendency, like if a man had a bad relationship with their father, it's much more difficult to get that understanding of a biblical father relationship with God, right? Because okay, well, my dad left me, so this is just like what representation do I have, right? So, is that attachment theory? Does that go to because I have negative attachments with people in my life, I apply that to God automatically, or is it coming from the other direction? Like I'm not sure how to attach to God, so I'm attaching to other people the same way. And I would venture to guess it depends on when they had a relationship with God and when they had a relationship with people. So it could go a bunch of ways. But
I think it could go a bunch of ways. I think probably this is just speculation on my part. It's probably more the former though, right? Because early on, children are very concrete. It takes a while for children to get to that place of abstract thought and concepts, right? Like God, and spirituality is in many ways abstract, although we want to make it concrete and should in every practical and accurate way we can. But so what happens is we come into the world, okay, where we need attachment. In fact, to the point that before attachment theory arrived on the scene, a guy named John Bowlby is the father of attachment theory. He was a British psychologist in the early and mid 20th century. The primary line of thought was that like an infant attaching to the mother was because the mother fed the infant. So the attachment relationship was considered a secondary drive to the drive for food, essentially, sustenance, right? So the thinking was the infant attaches to the mother because the mother provides the food. Come around the 40s and 50s, there's all kind of research coming out that is just not true. That actually these children need that attachment as a primary drive, and so that's where you had like Russian orphanages where there were terrible experiments where kids died because they were provided food and shelter, they were cleaned, but they weren't held, they weren't nurtured, they weren't being talked to and all of this. And it was called failure to thrive. And many of them just died, right? And all sorts of stuff like that. So because what's happening is, so in psychology, there's these concepts called the internal working model of self and other. So I have this internal working model of self. So in other words, that's kind of who I see myself as, how I experience myself, my identity, and then internal working model of other, who I believe you to be, who I experience you as, who I'm anticipating you to be. And in infancy, those two are related. So like right now, we both got kids about the same age, that 1-year-old, right? That 1-year-old, the way we approach that child, that baby, right? The way we respond when the baby cries, the way we mirror the baby's face. The baby goes, oh, and we go, what is that, right? Or, the baby goes, and we go, oh, what's the matter? And we're mirroring the baby. We're responsive. And all of that is training that child to understand who he or she is.
Mm-hmm.
So the mirrored experience of the other and who the other's experience as activates and is the foundation of the sense of who we are. So carry that into adulthood, right? And this is why, let's say someone had an abusive father, okay? And then they get around men in adulthood and they puff up and they get aggressive or they shrink, whatever that response was. It's because a particular working model of other gets activated and it creates in them, or it activates in them, a corresponding internal working model of self. Yeah. So I got way in the weeds there.
No, I love it. Yeah, I enjoy those conversations. Now, I guess my next question is going to go to our kids, to go back to that. How do you as a dad now look at the theories that you look at the past that you have, look at what you experience in your practice and say, how am I raising my kids? What should I be saying to my kids? How should I be talking to my kids to make sure that, I forgot who it was that said, I'd be like, there's no chance that you haven't screwed up your kid already, right? So it's just a matter of how much you screw your kid up, right? And in what ways you screw your kid up, right? Because we are still human. We're all still going to do things that we shouldn't. And I can't count how many times I've had to apologize to my kids for doing something that I should not have done, right? But that doesn't mean that we don't have a view on how we should be fathers to them, to know that we're treating them right, that we're not causing long-term harm to them, especially as we're, quote unquote, working in the business for our kids. Mm-hmm. So how is it that you practically be a dad while thinking about all these things and making sure that you are not doing any of that long-term harm?
So I'll give you a pithy, catchy answer, and then I'll make it more practical if you want me to. So, I want my daughters to look at me as their father and learn what their heavenly father's like. And knowing that I will do that imperfectly, I want to own it with them every time I fail at that. So if I could do that, if I can show up representing the character of their heavenly father, trying to show them the love to whatever degree it's humanly possible for me, that I know their heavenly father has for them. And every single time I fail at that, acknowledge it, own it as such. Then I think I'm doing a pretty dang good job. Okay. So what does that mean? Well, that means, guess what? I need to do self-regulation. Mm-hmm. When my 3-year-old, when I'm running late, and this is this morning, okay? I'm running late. It's my day to take her to school, to preschool, right? I've got an 8:30 appointment. I know, I'm doing all the number crunching in my head, and she is sitting on the floor. She wants to wear these socks and these shoes, and these socks don't even fit her anymore, and these shoes aren't appropriate for school. And we're, what am I doing here first? Mm-hmm. What am I doing here first so that the way I show up with her is appropriate, and because it's going to pour into her, and it's still kind and loving, which doesn't mean she can do whatever she wants. Which I'll come back. Well, I'll say that now. And I'm totally blanking on his name. It'll come to me later, and I'll give him credit. But there's a psychotherapist up in the Pacific Northwest. He's written a whole bunch of books. He's at Seattle School of Theology. That's enough for someone to Google and figure out who I'm talking about. But he wrote a book on parenting, and he said children want to know 2 things: am I loved, and can I do whatever I want? Yes, no. Oh, now we have balloons. Oh,
geez. Now you're celebrating with balloons. For those of you not listening, you need to come on to see all of the amazing things Jake can do with his computer.
Some update. There must be some update. I can't stand these things, these updates. Anyway, but those are the 2 things, right? Am I loved, and can I do whatever I want? And we're trying to find that place where they always know, yes, I'm loved. No, I can't do whatever I want. Right? That's the sweet spot. but sometimes they can do what they want, right? And that's fun too, to get to do a little bit of spoiling, a little bit of splurging, and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. There's that show or that movie, Yes Day, where the parents will let they cannot say no to anything the kids request, right? And my kids have asked me, "Can we do a yes day?" I said, "Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's not a healthy thing to
sounds like
do
a terrible idea.
It's a horrendous idea. Like, it sounds hilarious and sounds awesome. There's like this part where they go through, and I didn't actually watch the show with the kids, but they, I think my wife was with them. Mom was watching that with you, right, buddy? So they like go through a car wash with all the windows down. I'm like, do you know how destroyed my car would be if I said yes to that? That's a terrible idea. Why would I do that?
Terrible. Yeah,
it's a horrendous idea. You get soap in your eyeballs. Everybody be crying by the time we got out of there. I'd have $40,000 in damage in the car, and I don't even have a $40,000 car. Like, I don't like. Jeez.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. But I do like that concept of, am I loved, and can I do whatever I want, right? So that you could totally see that in a child on a daily basis, right? Because they totally want to do whatever they want. That is for sure. And I'll just also say, I think adults want to know the same thing. Oh, for sure. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I totally want to do whatever I want a lot of times, right?
Absolutely.
But sadly, I still have to be an adult and figure that out. And I have to teach my kids to be an adult and do all that. Oh, what are you doing down there?
Look at there.
Popping up in between my arms.
Uh-huh.
But he just threw something at me. Now he's got to come back and get it. But you want to come have a seat, bud? Come here. No? You don't want to?
No?
No? You just want to peek around? Yeah, that's good, because you still have schoolwork to do, you bum. The joys of homeschooling. Yes.
Yes.
But
that's awesome.
So one thing that I tell my boys, hey, buddy, what do I say my goal in life is? When it comes to you, what's my goal? What do I need to do?
I don't remember.
You don't what? To be a better what?
Yeah.
No, for you to be a better what? Oh my goodness! Now he's just being a punk. All right, so my goal.
It's okay. I get it.
It's all making sense now to be a better chicken. What the dickens, this kid. So my goal is to raise better men than me, right?
That's
good. In order to do that, right, to have my kids look at me as their father, as they would as a mirror of what their heavenly Father would look like. I like that visual image. And my goal for my daughter now, because no matter what, again, 2024 says, she'll never be a man. That's just not a possible thing. But so she can't be a better man than me, but she can know what to look out for as far as who to marry, right? Like, she needs to be able to know, okay, well, to marry a better man than me, right? So if I can represent what it is to be a really good husband to my wife, that's a good representation for her when she grows up to go, okay, this is what I need to look for in a man to marry, is somebody who treats me the same way my dad treats my mom. And again, with the kids, they need to be able to see me or with the boys, they need to be able to see me treat my wife in that way so they know how to treat their wives. And when I fail miserably at that, which I will on an almost daily basis, I need to be able to own up to that and show them that same thing.
Yeah. And I think this is encouraging, just to back that up, what you're saying there about owning it. And so going back to all the research from attachment theory. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned earlier that we can have secure attachment relationships or insecure attachment relationships. Mm-hmm. And let's say we took our youngest, right, our 1-year-olds, or almost one, and we let's say from the time we brought them home, because my wife and I, conceivably, we could have done this. We set up little Lottie Joe's life so that she was never alone from at least one of us, right? We could sleep right outside her crib. We could always be right behind her. She's learning to crawl or walk or scoot. We could be right there, right? And so that she never experiences a rupture in this attachment to her parental units. That would not create secure attachment within her. It wouldn't. In fact, it would create this preoccupation, this anxiety of like, well, what would happen if you did go? What would happen if you did go? It would create fear. secure
And I would imagine as an
attachment-
adult that
Yeah.
would turn into a narcissist. Like,
Oh yeah,
everybody is here for
terrible.
me. Like, oh, it'd be
Terrible. It
horrendous.
would be terrible. Yeah, it would be so bad. Secure attachment is the result of continuous ruptures being repaired. So in other words, there are ruptures, there are mistakes, there are, moments where nobody's there and they don't come, or there's a misattunement. I'm not getting what you're saying, or I lose my temper and I say something angrily or whatever, but I repair it. If I consistently repair after ruptures, I'm training that child to believe ruptures are no big thing because we know how to repair. So the experience of the rupture in this fallen, broken world is needed for the repair, so that what we get after the rupture is better than what could have been before, which is actually the gospel, right? Like rupture and repair. That's the gospel. That's sin and the death of Jesus and our faith in him and being united to him. I mean, like, so this is in nature. This is like all over the place that we see this pattern.
So our ability to show our children the healthy repair after a rupture, what does a healthy repair look like, especially to I mean, because you have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, right? Or 1-year-old and a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
So obviously it looks different from a 1-year-old's perspective as it does a 3-year-old's, as it does my 9-year-old, right? So how do you represent what a healthy repair after that rupture looks like?
So, with a 1-year-old, it's they wake up in the middle of the night, she wakes up, she's crying because we're not there, and we come.
Yeah.
That's a repair, right? Or the dog barks and scares her, and we come and we soothe her. That's a repair. Or I mean, my 1-year-old is like hypersensitive to, if she's crawling around and she reaches for me and I'm busy and I turn to finish what I'm doing, that she loses it. It's like that turning of my back. It hits her deeply, which was actually surprising to me. But you know what? I turn around, I pick her up, I soothe her. So that's 1-year-old. With my 3-year-old, who is crazy verbal for her age, I can actually say things like, "Hey, Daddy yelled a minute ago, didn't he? I yelled at you about that. I'm so sorry. I didn't need to yell about that. I got frustrated and I lost my temper. I'm very sorry. Can you forgive me? Or I hope you'll forgive me," or whatever language you want. Different people have different language around that. What we don't want to do, what a lot of people's experiences in their homes is defensiveness, ignoring when mistakes were made, all of that kind of stuff. Where it's not, just own it. Like, that's the bottom line. You say, I messed up. We want our kids to know it's okay to be imperfect, because that's reality.
Yeah.
Right. And we also want to teach them the difference between a mistake and like an aggression or misbehavior that's intentional, and we have to teach them that by not just how we respond to them, but also how we model for them our own mistakes and misbehavior.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of, and I'm stereotyping here, but a lot of men have a tendency to have a hard time admitting when they're wrong. Anyways, people as a whole, right? But men in particular. So what kind of tips would you say? Because it's not like our kids don't know when we screw something up. Like, they can tell. They know. Like, oh, Daddy totally screwed that up. And it turns into a do as I say, not as I do situation. How do we get people to start down that path of learning how to repair appropriately? If they know they need to and they're just not very good at it now, what's a way to start down that path?
Well, first of all, do a reality check. Like, get your reality check around, I'm not perfect. Like, just, that may sound really simplistic or whatever, but have a conversation with the people who know you best, or do some reflective journaling or something like that, and just get real comfortable with the fact that you make mistakes. You screw up as a dad, you screw up as a husband. Okay, that's reality. Okay, because once we're in reality, now we can do something. Okay, and I think a good next step is, a lot of us need to change our thinking about emotions. So, a lot of us were raised having certain beliefs or messages. They may have not been communicated to us directly, but we somehow or another kind of picked up on these beliefs like, oh, it's not okay to be angry, for example, right? Well, that's not true. So, one of the things I say to my daughter is, you can always tell me if you're angry, even if you're angry with me. If I made you sad, I want you to tell me you're sad. Like, the emotions are welcome. I'm a safe person for you to come and you have whatever emotion you want. Now, guess what? There may be some boundaries around what we can and can't do in our anger. Yeah. It's okay to be angry. It is not okay to throw plates on the floor.
That's what I tell my kids. Like, emotions are okay, actions are not. Like, we don't react in our emotions. Emotions are normal. Yeah.
That's right. Emotions are normal. But that comes back to, am I loved and can I do whatever I want? Right? Am I safe? Am I safe here with whatever my emotions are? Yeah, absolutely. I want to know that. Thank them for it. Right? Another thing that I think can be really helpful is to understand that validation does not equal agreement. Right? So if my daughter is 3-year-old is absolutely having a meltdown that I won't let her wear, these shoes that are 2 sizes too small to school, but that's what she wants to wear. And she's mad about it. And she's telling me, I'm mad. Dad, you made me mad. Can I validate her anger without thinking that means I'm agreeing with her? Well, I understand you want to wear these shoes. And I'm telling you can't. That makes sense that you're angry. Yeah. It's also my job to take care of you. And part of taking care of you is, to say yes and no, because there are certain things I know are better for you or worse for you, whatever. Yeah. Right? So, validate your kids. Validate their emotional response. That's not the same as agreement. You're not telling them that they're right in their thinking. Yeah.
You said something there that I try to, and I don't know if I'm overly sensitive to it, but it's like a, now I'm trying to remember what you said, but I need to pull it. When a child has the emotion and, and the validating of it, what the heck did you say? There's a specific thing you said that I want to ask about, and it'll come back to me. So I'll ask a different question instead.
Okay.
All right. So when, as parents, as adults, we are supposed to be representing what we, or hopefully we're representing what we want our children to grow up to be, right? How do we make sure that we're not pushing too hard one way or another? Or, there are certain things that I know that I used to do that I was running away from what I saw when I was a kid, right? So I, wanted to make sure my kids never did that. So for instance, I used to cry a lot when I was a kid, and I know now that I hated the fact that I did that. So now when I see my kids cry, it almost irks me to the point where I'm like, no, this is not what we're doing, right? How do we regulate and understand and have that, be able to piece that together and look back? It's one of the reasons at the beginning of the podcast I like to ask about our dads, right? Because once we know kind of where we're getting some of our ideas from, it can help us correct what we're doing now, if we're doing something wrong or whatnot. So how do we identify those things that we are pinning from our past onto our kids, to make sure that we're not turning them into almost doing exactly the opposite of what we want to do, but turning them into what we don't want, as opposed to guiding them in the direction that we do want?
Yeah. So, part of that is getting really clear about our own stories, right? Like if I don't have awareness of the stories that are driving me, I am doomed to repeat them. Then that is what is going to run the show, right? But the moment I gain awareness, right? The moment I have awareness, oh, wow, I'm connecting dots between, I'm making sense of this experience, that experience from my childhood. And I get this awareness of, oh, wow, this behavior goes back there. Now I have choice. I'm not saying that awareness alone is sufficient for change, but I do think awareness is necessary for change, and it's an important first step. And so I think being brave enough to do some self-exploration around that. Go do a family of origin intensive. There are places all over that do, just Google it, family of origin intensive, and go spend 3, 4, 5 days with some professionals helping you unpack the stories you tell yourself about yourself from childhood and connecting it to present day behavior. That's one of the best things I think we can do for our kids, is that kind of work. But because then in the moment, right? Then in the moment I can be like, wow, okay, I know when I'm having this thought or when I'm doing this behavior, that is being driven by an old script, an old story, right? Here's a good phrase. It's a 50-cent reaction to a nickel problem. When I have a 50-cent reaction to a nickel problem, I'm not just responding to the present.
Yeah.
I'm responding to something from the past as well. Right? So I want to train myself to have awareness of that. And if I can start there now, as my kid starts to do these things, I can stay present. I don't go automated, letting the past run the show. I can stay present with the kid and help them think through this moment, right? I can help them navigate it, the behavior. Like with the crying example, I think another piece of this is moderation, right? Like, very few people would say it's good to never cry. Or it's good to always cry. There's, something in the middle is probably the healthiest place to be. We don't want to be at 0 or 10 all the time. We want to be 4, 5, 6 most of the time. And so, saying that to my kids, hey, it's okay to cry sometimes. But gosh, it seems like you're crying a whole lot. Have you ever heard of the story of the boy who cried wolf? I mean, those fables are around for a reason, right? Like, just talking to them about it, talking to them about the effect it will have on their relationships. I mean, part of our job as parents is I want my girls to grow up to be someone other people want to be around.
Yes.
Otherwise, life is going to be really hard, right? So telling them like, hey, we're having this conversation with my 3-year-old, my 3.5-year-old daughter right now. Like, hey, 1, maybe 2 poop jokes, and then it's not funny anymore. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Like, it's not. I know you want to be funny, but it's not that funny if you do it too much. And just telling her, like, people aren't going to think that's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, regulation for sure. And whether it's emotion, whether it's actions, whether it's whatever, regulation is definitely going to be a key. And I think that goes into even working with our employees, working inside of our business, and kind of identifying what we're doing inside of our business. Like I've been working through being a prior military guy for a long time. When I was long ago, when I was first an enlisted guy. I was the guy that they would always call on. I was a E5. They'd call on me all the time to go fix all of the problems. So I was the guy that would yell at everybody, like, "Hey, we've got an issue. Go take care of that person." So I was the guy. Adam or Sergeant LeBar, go and take care of it. And what a terrible way to lead, right? But that's the way I was told I needed to lead, so that's the way I led, and that was those were the times that they used me, and it almost fed into what you were talking about earlier, that hero child thing. Like, okay, well, this is what they need me to do, so I'm just going to be whatever they need me to do, and I'm going to go tackle this problem. So that was, and I didn't use any of my own thought in how I was reacting to that. It was just, this is what they need in the moment, so I'm going to go do this. And now knowing, I learned a long time ago that I needed to separate myself from that type of person. And I don't ever want to go back to that again. But I know that I still need to be a really good leader in both my family and my business. So it's trying to balance that. Okay, well, now how do I really learn how to lead people correctly inside of my business? Not in the way that I used to, but have a new way of looking at it and a new way of doing it. But again, the only way to know how to not do something is to identify what you were doing incorrectly. So I was very thankful that I started to learn that and try to work through that now, which goes into my working theory, my working thing that I'm still kind of piecing together, is all of our kids being our own individual businesses, right? And we're the CEO of those businesses. My goal is by the time they're 18 is I just become a board of advisor. I'm no longer the CEO of the business. The business is running on its own. I'm now just on the board of advisors. You call me whenever you need me. I'm here to take care of you. And that goes just as well. I mean, I'm the COO of our education company, ADPI, and it's like, okay, well, I need to make sure that all of the people inside my company can lead in their roles, because one day I'm not going to be the COO. Like we're probably going to hire that out, or we're going to, maybe somebody inside the company is going to promote to that, and I'm going to literally going to only be on the board. So I want to be able to lead the people in my company in a way that allows them to know that they have the authority to do whatever they want inside, or obviously within reason. I've set up the boundaries. We've set up the guidelines. We know what's going on. Similarly to as a dad, they know that they get to make decisions on their own based off of the values and the instructions that I've given them thus far, and the parallels that is between raising a child and growing a business.
I like it.
I don't remember where I was going with all this, but that's one of the, identifying the things that we've done in our past that we're applying right now, and being able to be self-aware of those mistakes that we've made and be able to write them down and think through them and contemplate how ineffective it was, so that we can actually be effective leaders both at home and in our businesses. What kind of parallels have you seen, so that I can steal some of your ideas for this theory that I'm building out? What sort of parallels have you seen in raising kids? And because your kids are kind of in that startup phase, right? Where it takes a lot of effort. You're not seeing a lot of the return yet. You're still it's just constant just work into the business, but it's not really doing much for you yet. Like that, still barely cleaning. I'm not even cleaning up their own poop yet. Like, come on, we're got to be really close to getting done with this, right? But between being a dad and starting a business and running a business,
I love that. I've never thought about this before. So you're going to get my raw, unprocessed thoughts, but I like it. Yeah. I do. I think that mindset of, this is a long game. This is a long game, right? Like, I am just now in my actual business after 7 years. I've done well. I've made good money and all of that, but I've also not paid myself what I could have. I've reinvested in the business, right? And I've seen my employees make, I've looked at their W-2s versus what mine, and like, oh wow, they had a good year.
They had a wonderful year. So happy they did.
I'm happy, and I am. Yes. I'm happy they did. They deserve it. They deserve every bit of it. But I'm just now getting to that place where, we're kind of turning a corner, and some of this front end investment, we're getting to now see some benefit and some fruit to that. And I definitely see that in parenting, there are lots of joys in the moment, right? Lots of joys in the moment. But in terms of like the day to day, for example, my wife and I just had this conversation recently. So we had decided, this is a year ago, I don't know, months ago, a year ago, we're going to eat at the table tonight, every night. It's more work. It's all this. We're going to eat at the table. And something happened a couple of months ago. I think one of the kids was sick or something like this. And then we ate, in the living room watching TV. Yeah. And then it happened again. And then and we did a course correction, not too long ago. Like, no, let's get back to the table. And my goodness, like, it is more work. It is. It just is. Right? Like, if we turn on a show, a cartoon for the girls, they're glued to the screen. My wife and I can actually talk. We're in comfortable chairs, like the whole living room is kid-proof virtually. We got mats down, it's good. It's easy. Versus, we're around the table and we've got, they need to be engaged and they're dropping stuff on the floor and, all of it, like, it's a lot more work, but we know why we're doing it. This is the long game. Porters eat at the table together. Porters value connecting without technology. And we say that, like, we're saying those things to my daughter. So I think that endurance in those startup years, I love the metaphor there, the endurance in those startup years to have a vision for what's possible and what's to come, and to be able to embrace the pain points, the challenges as worth it because where it's headed. I think that's huge. Another piece that was coming to my mind as you asked me about that, and unfolded that beautiful metaphor for me is around, I really believe that as leaders, our organizations that we lead, when we've been there long enough, they're a mirror of us, right? So I'm looking at this system I'm leading, and where I see, inadequacies, insufficiencies, where I see gaps, I need to turn that around and look at myself. And oh my goodness, do children provide an opportunity for that? Right? Like, ooh, I mean, there's some real come to Jesus moments I've had with myself where it's like I'm correcting my daughter about something, and as I'm doing it, I hear my own words and I'm thinking of something I did earlier that day. And I'm like, okay, message received, Lord. Thank you. Yeah. And so recognizing that this corporation, this organization that I'm growing here, I can't carry it further than I am. I can't lead it beyond where I am individually in my own process, in my own character, my own integrity. That's huge. I think that's huge. Yeah.
We trust the Lord to take the wheel on some of those.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I talk all the time about how our kids almost physically wear a mirror around their neck. Like we see them do something and then they look at us and it's like you just see yourself shining back and you're like, why did I allow myself to be seen doing things like that so that they follow that, Oh, man.
Oh, gosh.
Even if it's fun things, right? Like the way my kids climb trees. Like, I mean, it's just like, golly, and swinging like daggum apes across the trees. And I'm like, that is exactly what I used to do. Like, I cannot, like, the amount of trees I fell out of, like, and all I got to do is go, well, hopefully if they fall, they don't break their head. An arm is okay, but a head is not. So let's I'm not going to stop you from being a kid, but here we go. Oh man.
Yeah.
So what has been your favorite part thus far about running the business that you started up?
So, two things come to mind. So I guess I don't have one favorite. I've got two favorites, if that's okay.
No problem. I think I can allow that.
One is more sort of externally focused, and one is more a little internal to the business. So externally, like I love seeing relationships change, marriages heal, and I mean not 100%. That's unreasonable, but so many of the couples that we work with, I truly believe like the work that we get to do with them is going to change the trajectory of their family line. This is legacy making work that we're doing and just seeing people radically transform. And I'm super excited. Just like 2 months ago, I finally figured out after a years long process of taking what I do with couples in like a 1-on-2, like, this couple and me or this couple and someone else on my team, and actually scaling it and having like this online group coaching based program and being able to take it big, wide and way more accessible to way more people at, half the cost. And probably we'll see when I run all the metrics, but I think it may even be even more effective. And that's just cool. Like, I mean, that's been 7 years of working toward that, and seeing the beta group there and getting the initial feedback from the people who are participating is awesome, because I know this isn't just this husband and wife; it's their kids and it's their grandkids, and it's just cool. It's whole communities, faith communities, and anyway.
That's awesome.
So that's the external piece. The internal piece is, even though I left pastoring, I was never able to just turn off my pastor's heart. And to a fault, in fact, I know this about myself. To a fault, I'm loyal to my team, and I really care about their good and their development. And so hiring my team and investing in them and getting them trainings and pouring into them and mentoring them and seeing them succeed, helping use the platform I've built to launch them, is super cool. It's just really meaningful to me to
awesome.
get to see people on my team thrive.
Love it. Yeah, it's a pretty rewarding experience, I would imagine, watching all of that happen and the what you've built. So, what does the future look like? Obviously, you just gave us a glimpse into what the future kind of looks like in the business as far as the group side of the house. But what does the future look like? How big are you wanting to go? What kind of offerings are you looking to wanting to do? Like, open the door a little bit.
Yeah, so we're continuing to hire on our team for those people who want to come and actually do in-person work with us, and we do a whole bunch of programs. We do a week-long program for women who discovered they've been betrayed, and we do family of origin intensives. We talked about those earlier. We do those for groups of men or groups of women, and so continuing to offer that and invest in a team who's able to do that work with more and more people. Expanding the online program is going to be huge. But I've got a book coming out soon.
Nice.
I can't even remember what the title's going to be, but it's something about couple-centered recovery, which is the name of my model. So that's coming out soon, and I'm really hoping to reach more people with less time because I want to be there for my family. I've got good boundaries in place right now around weekends and evenings. I really do rarely work an evening or a weekend. But even just during the week, like being able to pick up my daughter early from school or, that kind of thing. I'm not quite there yet with flexibility, without a whole lot of planning. That's where I want to be. So, that's where I'm headed. That's what I'm wanting to do. Yeah.
Yep. That's awesome. Yeah. It's one of the benefits and downfalls of owning our own businesses and running all of our own stuff is it's, especially at the beginning, it doesn't go unless you're doing it. Right. and then as you're building it out, you can kind of build it to where you want to go. And you know that in the long run, like you were saying, like looking at your employees' W-2s and going, wow, like it's so awesome that they're able to make all of that, even though I made nothing this year, or relatively speaking, but knowing that what the future actually holds. And it's like, no, this is and it's one of the things I've like heavy as the head that wears the crown type of thing, right? Like I'm building this knowing that the future is going. So I'm looking for compound interest, not what's actually happening in my bank account right now, both literally and figuratively. So, but it's an exciting time being able to do all of that. And, as we were talking about the dad stuff too, is it was popping more in my brain of, investing in our kids is very much a compound interest type of thing, right? Because we may not really see the return until they have kids. And then we're like, oh my gracious, like I can't wait to be a grandpa, like I wanted to be a dad since I was like 13 and now I am of 3 kids. And it's like, I can't wait to be a grandpa now, because I just know that the return on that investment is going to be unbelievable to watch and, see how my kids interact with their kids. And, I was just really looking forward to that. So, so I want to pass it over to you for a minute. We're getting close to wrapping it up. Pass it kind of over to you and say, hey, is there anything that you really wanted to touch on that we haven't touched yet? Or is there anything that, while we were chatting, you were like, I need to come back to that and we haven't yet?
Gosh, I've really enjoyed all the ground we've covered. I feel like, you've helped me process a lot of my own story in this, just putting these pieces together and I know that I'm a new dad. I'm only 3.5 years into this. But I did say this earlier, but I think this is what's coming up for me having this conversation is how critical it is that we're aware of the stories, our stories in a conscious and intentional way, because we are getting to actually help create the stories our kids are forming.
Yeah.
And what I want to do as a dad is I want to be a dad where they can tell me what those stories are. I'm safe enough for them to say, this is what I'm thinking, or this is what I'm believing, or this is what I'm seeing. And that I can help shape that in an even more intentional way. But, got to do my own work first. Got to be open to that. Got to be safe enough for them around that. That's who I want to be for sure.
I cannot express how much I love that. At the Florida Go Abundance event, I talked about being a dad for a little while. It was, I got to present on what, sharing some of those ideas on my theory and kind of walking some of that through. And I guess it's less of a theory and more of a concept. But also, I mentioned that every single day is a day that we can write our relationship with our kids. So both WRITE and RIGHT.
Ooh,
So
that's
if you
good.
can take those, yes,
Yeah.
write that down.
That's good right there. Yeah, that'll
Dr.
preach.
Porter
That'll
says
preach.
it was great. Okay, so
Yep.
but if you take that moment and say, no, I really want to WRITE this relationship right now. I want to write what this is for us right now, so that they know what that story actually is, that we're sharing together, and write it together. It's a like, what better gift can we give to our kids than their ability to be able to do that themselves as they're growing up, and be able to have those conversations and be able to work through it? And what better way for us to be able to be good, solid parents than for them to trust the ability to come to us at those moments that, because there was, just no matter what my parents said, and it was no fault of them by any means, but I never would have felt like I was comfortable enough to go and have some of those difficult conversations with my parents, where I want to know that my kids, no matter what, feel comfortable having them. And I don't know if I will be successful in that. I mean, each of us still has our own individual ideas and thoughts and actions and choices and whatever. And I can't force them to come to me when they're feeling those things, but I really hope that I can open that door as much as humanly possible. And to your point, being a new dad, it's one thing that I'll keep passing things on to you, as I've got 6 years of experience on you. On this,
but I'll take that's twice what I have. Yeah.
So my 9-year-old, he, one thing I always used to tell him is like, look, I have never been a dad to an X-year-old before, right? So I'm learning how to be a dad to a 9-year-old, just the same way you are learning how to be a 9-year-old. So as you make mistakes as a 9-year-old, I'm making mistakes fathering a 9-year-old, because I've never done it. I don't know how to do it. So and just when we think we have a 5-year-old down, they become 6, and then they become 7, and then they just keep changing on you.
Yes.
And then when you have another one coming in behind it, it's like, well, now you're influencing the one behind, and then the one behind is influencing you, and it's just it's every day is learning something on how to be a dad. So.
Wow.
Which again, is just like starting a business and growing a business. Like it's all
levels of complexity, right? It's just
very
increasing
much so.
levels of complexity the whole time. Absolutely.
I don't know. I was on some homeschooling Facebook page or something yesterday or today, and it was this lady was talking about how she's been homeschooling for 23 years because she's got 9 kids. I think nine kids or 11 kids, something like that. But she's been homeschooling since the beginning, and I was like, "Holy gracious,
she's
that
tired.
is patience."
She needs a medal.
No kidding. You have some patience, woman. That is insane. But 23 years of being a homeschool parent, and I just started this year, so we'll see if I make it through 2. But I got to make it through 2 before I get to 23.
You got it. You could do it,
man.
You
Oh man.
could do it.
But Jake,
Good
it was
stuff.
absolutely awesome having you on. Thank you so very much for coming on and chatting with us, and just the absolute wisdom that you were able to share with us. I look forward to having more conversations in the future. I think that we have a lot that we could chat about, and if maybe even having you on again for a take 2 as the kids grow up, as the business continues growing, and we could talk about the change from now until from then to now. But if people wanted to get a hold of you, reach out to you, what is the best way for them to be able to do that, Jake?
drjakeporter.com, or I'm on all the social medias at Dr. Jake Porter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all of that. Or email me, jake@daringventures.com. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. Yeah.
We'll have all of that in the show notes for sure. So please reach out to Jake. I very well may after this, just on the personal level. But thank you so much again, Jake. I appreciate it. Everybody, please like, subscribe, reach out to Jake, and we'll see everybody on the next show.
Thanks, Adam.